All right, my friends, welcome to another video lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be discussing camera syncing. Taking interview footage we've shot with two different cameras and audio that we've recorded with an external audio recorder, a Zoom H6, and bringing all of that into the timeline in Premiere and syncing it up so that the audio that we're hearing is synchronized to the video that we're seeing. So when our interview subject says something, the words we hear are synchronized to the movement of his mouth. So if we dive into the project panel here, you can see I've got two separate camera sources, Panasonic G9 and a Panasonic GH5, one clip from each camera there. And then I've got our external audio recorder sources here, a boom and a lav. So we need to get all of this into the timeline and synced up. Now you can see in the information panel here that the footage from our cameras is actually at 24 frames per second, and it's also 4K. Two different sizes of 4K, UHD 3840 by 2160 and DCI 4K 4096 by 2160. And because our interview footage is at 4K, it will allow us much more flexibility in the post-production process when it comes to framing our interview subject if we edit in a regular HD timeline, that is 1920 by 1080. Because the frame size of our media is so much larger than the frame size we're editing in, we'll be able to zoom in without quality loss and be able to reframe our subject in a very flexible manner. So in order to do this, we need to create a sequence that has that regular HD frame size, 1920 by 1080. So to do that, we're going to head up to File, New, and choose Sequence, or of course, do what the cool kids do and use a keyboard shortcut, Command or Control N. And that launches this big scary window here, which contains a variety of presets that we can use to create a new sequence. So we want to make sure to twirl down HD 1080p and then select HD 1080p 23.976 frames per second here, essentially 24 frames per second. So with that selected, I'm going to head down to Sequence Name and name it. I'm going to call it Interview 2025 underscore my name. You type your name and today's date, which in this case is July 25th, 2025. Hit OK. And you can see my sequence is placed outside of the sequence bin. I want to rectify that by just dragging it in here. Twirl that down, and there it is. You can see in the timeline, I've got my tracks that I can edit with now. So now in order to get all this media into the timeline and synced up, we're just going to begin dragging it in. But before we do that, I'm going to open up each of my cameras in the source monitor so I can determine which one is my main shot. If I double click on the GH5, this looks like the main shot, relatively straight on from the front. And then the G9, yep, is the alternate angle here, a little more from the side. So I'm going to take the GH5 and drag it onto V1 and A1 because it's my main camera. So I'm dragging it in, and as soon as I let go, I get this clip mismatch warning dialog box. It says this clip does not match the sequence's settings. Change sequence to match the clip settings? And the reason this is coming up is because our sequence is at 1080 and our clip is at 4K. And it's asking, do we want to change the sequence to match the clip? Do we want to make the sequence 4K? No, we don't want to do that. We want to preserve that reframing freedom that we're going to get by editing in this smaller sequence. So we're going to say keep existing settings. Keep this sequence at 1920 by 1080. And you can see, of course, our 4K media looks gigantic in this smaller frame size. And that's exactly what we want. So now we're going to take the G9 and drag it onto V2 and A2 here. Also looks very large. And then I'm going to bring my audio video divider bar up just a little bit so I can see tracks A3 and A4, and bring my H6 boom in, and my lav. So now we've got all 4 sources in here. The G9, the GH5, the boom, and the lav. So the first thing I'm going to do is take care of the problem that we have with the frame size here. You can see that this is the actual size of our media, and it just doesn't fit into our smaller sequence frame size. And I want to make sure you understand what's really going on here and how this actually works. So I'm going to select the G9, go up to Effect Controls, click on the word Motion, and then change my Select Zoom Level drop down here to all the way down to 10%. And you can see here is the actual size of what has been recorded. This outline is the actual frame size that came from the camera, and the viewable area is the frame size of our sequence. And what this allows us to do is to be able to move our subject around in the frame with great freedom. Change his size, and frame him to suit our purposes. Pretty cool. So I'm going to go back to my fit view here. And what we're going to do is change the represented frame size of our media so that we can see everything inside the viewable area in our sequence. So I'm going to select both the G9 and GH5, right click and choose Fill Frame. Not Fit to Frame, Fill Frame. Click there, and now you can see that the media has been sized to the frame. It hasn't actually gotten smaller. It's still 4K. We still have all that freedom to reframe without quality loss. We can just see everything inside the frame now. So if I click on the G9 again and head back up to the effect controls here, you can see it's been rescaled to 50%. That's what gets it to fit inside this frame, using that fill frame command. Okay, so now that we have our cameras sized, let's turn our attention to the audio and see what's going on there. If I play, oh boy, sounds like a mess, a jumbled mess. That's because our sources haven't been synchronized yet. So we're going to bring them into synchronization with each other by using the synchronize function. So I'm going to select all my sources by either lassoing here or using a keyboard shortcut, Command or Control A. Again, right clicking and choosing synchronize. That launches the synchronize clips dialog box here. And we're going to use the audio method of synchronization and track channel 1. Now watch what happens when I click OK. You'll see the clips move. Premiere will process, and boom, they moved. So now when we play, they should be in sync with each other. Let's check it out.
They hosted sessions every Tuesday inside of a classroom on carpet, which was probably not the best idea.
Perfect. All 4 sources synced up. So now we get to go through and choose the best audio to use for our editing purposes. So I'm going to do that by using the solo function. So I'm going to start with the GH5 here, solo that track, and listen to just that audio that came from the camera.
Inside of a classroom on carpet, which was probably not the...
Doesn't sound too great. And that's because we're hearing the camera mic, which is picking up not only the direct projection of our subject's voice, but all of the reverberance in the room, his voice bouncing off the walls, the floor, everything. It sounds very hollow because the camera is 6 to 8 feet away from him. It's nowhere near the source of the audio, his mouth. All right, let's try the G9.
The best idea. And I worked at it.
Same thing there. All right, so let's try the boom now.
I wanted to get into it, and I practiced. I talked to the...
Wow, that sounds much better. Much closer to his mouth. In fact, it's right over his head. All right, let's try the lav. See how that sounds.
high school student. I wanted to get into it.
Wow, that sounds great. Okay, so we know the boom and the lav are much better than the cameras, so we really don't need the camera audio. So I'd like to delete the audio for both the cameras. But you can see when I click on the audio for the GH5, I also get the video selected. That's because I have linked selection turned on here, which means that clips that were imported together, audio and video, are married together in the selection if you have link selection turned on. If I turn it off, now I can select the video and audio separately. So now I'll delete that GH5 audio and also the G9. And then I'll take my boom and lav and move them up. And when I do that, I'm being careful not to drag them left or right. I want to preserve that synchronization. And you can see I get a little time indicator there that shows if I've dragged it out of sync from its previous position. So I want to make sure I see all zeros there, indicating I haven't moved it left or right. Okay, so now let's whittle down our boom and lav and see which one is our very best source. Let's start with the boom.
Back in high school, I played a lot of video games.
Sounds pretty good, but you can still hear some of the reverberance of the room, and that's because the boom is over his head and it's still picking up the reflections of his voice off of the walls and the floor. So now let's try the lav.
Back in high school, I played a lot of video games.
Much better. This is clearly our best source, and it's because it's the closest to our subject's mouth. It's right here, clipped to his jacket. So because the lav's going to be our primary source, I'm going to disable the boom. I'm not going to mute it. I'm just going to actually disable the clip. I'm going to select it, right click and choose enable. And you can see now it's grayed out, indicating that it's not a functioning source. It's still there. I haven't deleted it. We just won't hear it when we play.
So, back in high school,
and I don't want to get rid of it. I want to keep it as a backup, just in case something goes wrong with the lav. Like we've talked about in another video lesson where maybe the subject accidentally hits the lav with his hand, or there's some rustling of the clothes, something like that. So I want to keep that boom as a backup source, but I'm going to move the lav into my primary A1 position here. So I'm going to take the boom, drag it down, select both, drag them up, and now I've got my lav on A1, boom on A2. And there you have it. We have our two cameras and the best audio source from our external recorder synced up and ready to start cutting in the timeline. All right, my friends, that about does it for this video lesson on camera syncing. I'll see you again in the next one.